George Kilpatrick Inspiration for the Nation, celebrating people we feel good about. Well, you talk about people we feel good about. We have, I'm going to do like Dr. Rick does it. We have, ladies and gentlemen, a radio legend. And I mean, if you have been in Central New York for any period of time, you know this man. He is none other than Professor Emeritus of the great Newhouse School at Syracuse University, producing, as he would say, some of the world's greatest broadcast talent, many of whom studied under the tutelage of this man, who will be on this Tuesday celebrating, are y'all ready for this? 80 years on this planet. My mentor, my professor, everybody's professor, Dr. Roosevelt, Reuben Wright Jr., but we know him as Dr. Rick.
Hi, George. It's a pleasure to be on your radio show here on Power 620, man. I'm really just absolutely emotional, man, when you mentioned a birthday of mine coming up this coming Tuesday, the 24th of July. And of course, I'm leaving the 70s. 70s are going into my rear view mirror of life, and I'll be 80 years old, George. And thank God I'm still here. There's so many classmates I've had. So like every time I get a phone call or somebody calls me, it's to announce the ascension to heaven.
Right.
So, but I'm here. Health is good, feeling great, man, and still it's showtime, man. Still
this is a hard brother to catch up to. I'm gonna tell you that right now. But I will tell you this. So we caught up recently. I was basically cleaning out the garage, doing some summer cleaning, right? Getting the garage out. And I came across this box. And I look at the box, and I was like, there were these cassette tapes. And I was like, these aren't my tapes. And I could tell the handwriting wasn't mine. I was like, these won't belong to Dr. Rick. This is because we were all working together down at Power 620, as you know, the Sunday, we blew out the whole Sunday. You had, of course, the Sunday, what you call it? Old school Sunday. Yeah, old school Sunday
with Dr. Rick Wright. I kicked off 12 noon, 1 o'clock, and went for like 6-7 hours.
6-7 hours.
Sunday afternoon, man.
It was showtime, baby. And the bro. So anyway, and just talk about the institution of that. But anyway, and so I was like, I called him. I said, Dr. Rick, guess what? I got some tapes, brother. Let's get together. So, what did you find in that box? What happened when we got together?
Only thing I can tell you, George, you called me. You really called me late at night too.
I did. It was late at night.
And then I went back and checked my voicemail, and you said it was really urgent, man. Call me. I got something here, man. And I called you up last night. You say, Rick, I was going through boxes in my garage and came across a box full of old Power 620 and also Power 1069.
Right, Power 1069. Probably those tapes are probably from 1069, probably.
Yes, they are from Power 1069 when we had our facility at the Power 106.9, the main channel of not HD1 or 2 or 3, but the main channel, and WPHR. So, God, I was just blown away. And we were going through it this morning, and all of these audio tapes. In fact, I got just hundreds of audio tapes of all radio shows I've done all in my life. And of course,
you've been so good at cataloging and keeping track. You know, you're really good at that.
But here's what was heavy about this group that we found this morning. And I mean, it's a whole stack of tapes. Sandra Smokes, the late Sandra Smokes, superstar, sister journalist of yesteryear, was a major syndicated column too, and based at the Syracuse Post-Standard, the Newhouse newspapers years ago. And Sandra, of course, it's gone to heaven. And she also did a show on Power also. But the first thing that comes out of the bag is 4 audio tapes. This is absolutely gold of the big tribute show that we did on Sandra Smokes on a Sunday afternoon and talk about all of her incredible accomplishments and everything. And that tape came out. So, George, we're sitting in your conference room in that beautiful office of yours over on James Street. And while you mentioned my birth, what did you say to me, George?
I said, your birthday's coming up, right, bro?
Yeah. And then I reached into the tape looking at the next one in my hands, and it was my birthday show that I did 24th July. And I think we're talking 2015 or 2013. And God works in mysterious ways. I'm telling you, had be Sandra Smokes in heaven said, okay, it's time for Dr. Rick. He's going to go to his birthday. Let's give him a birthday gift via George and all that incredible memorabilia he's got in his garage in the house. So, George, thank you so much, man. And the key thing, I have a lot of the shows on digital files. And man, I just got boxes and boxes of audio tapes, cassette tapes at Power, and also other stations that I've worked to in my life. And I'm working on a book, man, and it's boxes of stuff. And I'm going to hire me a bunch of young people, man, and pay them, a nice salary to go through, so I can catalog all that stuff, man.
When Dr. Rick thinks about his legacy in broadcasting and what you are trying to do to tell our story, what do you think of? What are some of the things that come to mind? Because I know it ain't just one thing with you. I was talking to my producer today, and we were talking about, I said, I got this interview with Dr. Rick, and we got to create a little segment out of it. I don't know how we're going to do it, but
we'll make it happen. George, I tell you what, looking at my life, of course, I was born, and I've told people this many times in radio. I was born in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. Did my undergraduate work at Elizabeth City State University. I was an industrial arts technology major and electronics minor. And of course, did my master's degree at North Carolina Central University in educational media and technology. Then off to Virginia State University for a certificate for advanced graduate studies in educational media management. And I came to Syracuse really for my doctoral degree. But what I'm really indicating, my life has been pretty much three worlds. And I broke into the business early because my father was the general manager of an African-American movie theater in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, during the days of segregation, George, when our folk had to sit in the balconies of theaters in the South. But the Virginia Carolina Amusement Company was a company my father worked with, and as a motion picture projectionist, electrician, and became manager of theaters, basically our African-American theaters. So I grew up in the motion picture industry, and the company, George, had interest in a local radio station there in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. And that's where I got my radio career started off. I was 15 years old. And my air name then was a nickname that my mother gave me, George Superstar Kilpatrick of the Omega Psi Phi fraternity. And here it is, everybody. The nickname that my mother gave me was Sonny. And my first on-air radio name was Sonny Wright at WGAI in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. And I'm talking like, this is like 1958 in my life. And of course, had a show that was basically an R&B show aimed at kids. And of course, had a clothing store in that city. Kata Harrison's son sponsored the show. And of course, you being in radio, got to have the revenue coming in. And of course, I was sounding absolutely horrible, man. Playing great songs by Fats Domino and, James Brown. You ever heard of Lloyd Price, man, with a big record called Lordy, 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 Miss Lordy?
That's before my time, brother. Sorry.
those are the records I was playing at that time. But of course, great records by Ruth Brown from Portsmouth Town. Mama, he treats your daughter mean, all those cuts. Well, that's what I was doing. And of course, I was in high school. And of course, that's my radio start. But I really owe a lot of my radio career to a wonderful lady I must mention tonight. She's also gone to radio heaven, was Mrs. Leola Dyson, who for 40 years was a major public relations director for the Rollins Broadcasting Company. And Rollins was a major company, had urban R&B stations. And that was a company I grew up in. And Ms. Leola Dyson was really like my godmother. And she taught me really all the incredible circular areas of radio broadcasting, not just on air, but she really concentrated on the business of radio and how you can make money in it, through the advertising and how to handle advertising and setting up that. And she had a daily show on WRAP in Norfolk called Around the Town with Ms. Leola Dyson. And she had all kinds of interviews with people and everything. And George, you love selling and stuff in radio. This is how she did it. With her show at WRAP Norfolk, it was on air middays aimed specifically at housewives. And she created a WRAP radio homemakers council and had all the ladies, if you heard the show, send a postcard in and put your name and address on the postcard. And then she put that in a big barrel that she had in the studio. And of course, sent everybody a certificate that was signed by the general manager of the radio station and Mrs. Dyson. And it was suitable for framing. That was really nice. And a membership card. And you had a number on your membership card. Now, all of the cards that Mrs. Dyson at WREP in Norfolk got, she would then set up, she had students from Norfolk State University, art students, to draw a coverage map of the radio station, which was southeastern Virginia, like Norfolk, Portsmouth, Newport News, and northeastern North Carolina, Edenton, Hertford, Elizabeth City, the Outer Banks of North Carolina, even Kill Devil Hills for the Wright brothers flew the first airplane. So when she got all of her cards in, she would pinpoint those in this big, gigantic coverage map on the wall. And that was her ratings. So a new business would come to town, a new bit of furniture store down on Church Street, which was really the African-American district of Norfolk. And Norfolk was a big Navy military town and a seaport town, a lot of good money too in that town in those days. So a new business would come in. She would call up this new business, a guy who's got a young lady got a furniture store, invite him on her show, said, no, it's not going to cost you anything. Just come on by. Let's interview. Talk about your business. Talk about the person's life and everything. And while she's got him on the air, she would say, hey, Mr. Kilpatrick, let's do something with your furniture store. Why don't we say the first 5 ladies who shows up at your store to buy anything, give them 50% off. And of course, what would happen? The power of her show, people showed up, man. I'm not talking tomorrow, within hours at the store down on Church Street. And she showed the power of what radio could do. By the time she finished interviewing the owner of the business, they were begging to buy airtime on her show. She demonstrated, what it would happen. Those days of live local radio, yes.
She proved that she could deliver the audience. Talking with my mentor, Dr. Rick Wright, going to be 80 years old this Tuesday, July 24th. And Doc, radio legend. I talked about radio legend and all the stuff that you've done. And you mentioned earlier that there were 3 parts to your life, and radio is one of them. What are the? Obviously, your life at Syracuse University, I guess, would be.
Yeah, I tell you, George, I kind of put it in these 3 categories: the military, professional broadcasting, and academia. And these have been 3 careers that basically, ever since I was a kid, basically have been run paralleling together. And of course, the content area of each one of those areas are the same. So basically, I'm working in a radio station. And then, of course, working in radio, lives of professional broadcasting was really all the materials that I used in my classroom when I taught on the academic side. And then, of course, in the military, right now, in fact, I'm on the board of directors of the National Naval Officers Association. And we represent all African-American, Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard officers. We're promoting diversity, inclusion, and equity. Those words that we got folk in Congress right now trying to kill us on. Well, we have a great organization, and I'm the historian and on the board of directors. And of course, we have a media component also, and working with the Chief of Naval Information at the Pentagon, the Marine Corps, and also the Coast Guard headquarters there in Washington, D.C. So there's the military side of me, professional broadcasting. And George, I think I've worked in at least or been associated with at least about 24 radio stations.
24.
And then, of course, academia, having been on 5 college faculties, on faculty, Elizabeth City State, North Carolina Central at Durham, Delaware State University, Dover, Delaware, where I was director of the education.
So far, 3 HBCUs. Next.
And your school, Howard University.
All right,
Washington,
my son's
D.C.
school. Don't get it twisted.
Yeah, your son's school. I was on faculty at Howard and, of course, Syracuse. So technically,
how long were you at Howard?
I was at Howard for 1 year. I really in my life. In fact, I first came to Syracuse in 1970, George. And that's when I first came to Syracuse. And what had happened, I was finishing up a certificate for advanced graduate studies at Virginia State. And God works in mysterious ways, man. That summer of 1969, we took all of our coursework, and then everybody in this special educational media program had to. It was like a really a mid-career professional program to help you to keep developing you and introducing you to all the new technologies of audio and visual communication at that time. So I had just accepted a position at Delaware State University at Dover, Delaware, as the director of their educational media center. And a professor, of audiovisual communications at Delaware State. So I'm at Delaware State, and my research project that I was working on when I was finishing up my certificate for advanced graduate studies at Virginia State was a whole study, which was really the projections and development of the Educational Media Center at Delaware State University. So that was 1969, 1970 academic year. The spring of 1970, I got a phone call from Dr. Harry Johnson, legendary African-American professor, one of the giants in the field of audio, visual, radio, television, and communications, and director of the program at Virginia State. He calls me, and I'm at that time at Delaware State, and he says, Roosevelt, everybody's got to have an on-site visitation by one of the top people in the field to sign off, on your, it's like a thesis, research study. And he said, I'm sending you Dr. Donald P. Ely from Syracuse University. And Dr. Don Ely was the director and head of the whole Center for Instructional Communications at Syracuse University. I could not believe he was one of the top names in the field. And he came down to spend 3 days with me at Delaware State, looked at the program, taught classes, meeting the chancellor, the president. And of course, we went down, Dover was the capital of Delaware, went down to the Department of Education, had a great time. So technically, the last night he was in Dover, we were at the Holiday Inn, George, having a nice meal. And he looked at me and he said, Roosevelt, I really hate to take you away from here, but you've done a great job here at Delaware State, but I got to get you back in school. And I'm really adamant about getting African-American young men and ladies in to get their PhDs. And I said, Doc, we're on it. He said, nope, want you to apply to our program at Syracuse. So I applied to the program at Syracuse, received a full doctoral fellowship, and I hit the town in September of 1970, and here at Syracuse. And I thought Syracuse really, George, could be like a little New York, man. I'll give that right there. You know what was heavy?
That's what you thought of it at the time?
Yeah, in fact, all of my family had migrated into, New York City. And I've been to New York City many times. We drove up from North Carolina to visit my Aunt Louise and everybody in Harlem, and my Uncle Bruce, who was a real heavy hitter there in New York City on the east side. Well, you're a New York City guy, so you know what I'm getting at. But nobody made the trip to Syracuse or Rochester in my family. So I'm here, with no family, never been here before, but I thought things would be rocking in Syracuse. George, I'm taking 476, which is the North Pennsylvania Turnpike
Northeast extension, yeah.
Yeah, from Philadelphia. And, you're riding up to Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, and you join 81 there. Okay, it's a Saturday. I went back home to North Carolina, stopped over at Dover, Delaware, spent the night, and then from Dover on my way to Syracuse. So, George, I'm getting off 476, the ramp onto 81. And I was being a radio guy, and you are too. We're in a car, man. I'm running up and down the dial, trying to find a station that's really popping. Found I said, where is everybody? In fact, the last urban station, I kept WDAS's signal out of Philadelphia.
Got
guy
up
with
in
the
the air.
Woods, Georgie Woods, and all those guys were at. And I lost that signal about halfway up the 476 highway of the Pennsylvania Turnpike. But here's the story, George. I found a radio station in Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, loud and clear on the low end of the dial. And it really was the SYR of one of your great stations you worked for many years. It was a news talk station, loud signal. And guess what? The story that greeted me that Saturday afternoon. And let me see if I can get the quote identically. This is the 1970s. And the quote was, we got a breaking news. The Negro football players are striking the football team at Syracuse University, citing racism. Now I'm headed to Syracuse, and of course, when I grew up, I'm an old guy. I finished high school in 1960.
Well, you're gonna be 80 on Tuesday, so we know you.
I got a lot of mileage, a lot of stories, George. But this is the story about Syracuse, man. So anyhow, I said, hold it. In 1960, Syracuse won the national championship in 1959, when I technically was a high school senior. And of course, loving radio and working local radio in, northeastern North Carolina and around Virginia and all, and news, and of course, high school, the audiovisual guy, listening to the sportscast of Jim Brown, Floyd Little, Ernie Davis winning the Heisman Trophy at Syracuse, all African-American brothers, and winning the national championship was when I was a senior in high school. And then, of course, the librarian at my high school introduced me to Syracuse because she found a bunch of books in the library and magazines were talking about the media, radio, TV program at Syracuse University when I was in high school. So here I'm headed to Syracuse. I thought things were rocking, man. hit the campus. And that was, the Vietnam era too. The students had protest, shut the university down in the spring of 1970. And of course, I'm riding in, and here I am in Syracuse. George, here, and then of course, radio. Dr. Myers, who was chair of the radio TV program, God bless Dr. Myers, who you knew, he just died at 100 years old. I got to keep the legacy of my other great mentor, Dr. Myers. He made it to 100, man, and still was real spry. Well, he was chair of the radio TV program. So I'm headed over to Carnegie Library. Newhouse 2 had not been built yet. Newhouse 1 had been built. President Lyndon Johnson had showed up and gave the Gulf of Tonkin resolution speech, which really was our escalation of the war in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And I say technically the Vietnam War was declared right on the steps of Newhouse. So anyhow, I'm headed over to Carnegie, and I see a sign on the bulletin board. You know those university bulletin boards? You got to sign on apartments, this, fraternity here, call this number, beginning of the year. Big sign said that WOLF Radio was looking for a weekend announcer to work on Saturdays and Sundays. And the person had to have a first-class radio broadcast engineering license. The FCC requirements for FCC license pretty much, stations, I'm saying, were heavily regulated, especially on the engineering side. So I picked up the phone and called over to the radio station, George, because I was looking at, we didn't have an R&B in this town, and I said, where is it, So I go over to WOLF, three-piece suit, man. I walked in. They didn't know I was black. I had called and I said, I'm Roosevelt Wright Jr. I'm a brand new graduate student here at Syracuse University. And I just saw a big sign on the wall at Carnegie Library, which was the headquarters of the radio. All the radio and television facilities were in Carnegie. And WAER was in a big 3 Quonset hut complex right behind Carnegie, right there on the corner where they got the new gym and everything, the barn.
Yeah.
Well, anyhow, so I see this sign, and I call over to WOLF Radio. So on the radio, they answer the phone. I said, hi, I'm Roosevelt Wright, new graduate student at Syracuse University. And I saw a sign on the wall here at the Carnegie Library. Y'all looking for a weekend announcer, and an engineer with a first-class FCC license. So I'd love to come over and apply for the position. I said, oh, yes, please come over. I said, where are you located? And they said, well, you take, 690 West, and you get off at the Getty Street ramp. And
turn right.
And make turn right. And you'll see, and that's what so your tower said, okay, I'll find you. So, hey, by the way, George, I was staying with the frat brothers, the brothers of the Omega Psi Phi fraternity. I had gotten here.
You stayed at the Q house?
Yeah, that's it. So I'm here, brand new, man. And so I stayed at the Q house, and the Q house was rocking. I mean, Omega chapter or Kappa chapter at that time was really, dominant. They had reformed the Kappa chapter.
Right, 1968.
Yeah. And so anyhow, I was staying out. So then I went back to the frat house, and I still had all my stuff packed up, living out of a suitcase, man. And went over to WOLF Radio. George, I walked in the door. They were good, those days, station like OLF had at least about 30 people working there. At least about 8 or 9 announcers, news, and everything. George, I walked into WOLF Radio, and there were the ladies of the receptionists there. They saw me, man, and it was like, I'm a Southern brother. I grew up, and I knew immediately what was happening because they thought I was a white guy. I know it must sound like on the telephone. So I walked with a 3-piece suit and everything, man. They didn't see the 3-piece suit. No, they saw a brother. And they said, oh, I said, I'm here to apply for I was talking to one of you ladies on the phone. I said, relax, Oh, you're Roosevelt, right? I said, so she gets up and goes get the general manager. And the general manager came out, man, and I won't call his name now because I'm going to say
call his name.
Mr. Tom Shine was his name.
Okay.
General manager of WOLF. He came up and he looked at me, and this is the first thing he said to me. He said, what's your name? I said, Roosevelt Wright. He said, I would love to hire you, but I'm looking for somebody with a first-class radio broadcast.
Yes. Yes,
and,
go ahead.
And so I looked him right and I said, I told him, I said, Mr. Shine, please hold it. Give me an opportunity to introduce myself. You've already made assumptions about me, and immediately I said, hold it. My name is Roosevelt Wright. I'm a brand new doctoral student in the instructional technology doctoral program at Syracuse. I said, I've worked in a lot of radio stations. Let's put it this way. I've also just finished teaching and headed up the media program at Delaware State University. And I worked, I started calling radio. I said, I worked at a lot of radio stations. That's what I told him real quick. And I said, by the way, I have a high school diploma. Yes, I have an undergrad degree in industrial arts technology and electronics. I have a master's degree in educational media, business, and commerce. I finished up a certificate for advanced graduate studies in educational media and management. And yes, I have a first-class FCC license. And I pulled it out, the verification card. I said, do you have one? So we could talk shop. Man, he was like speechless, man. And I was looking right straight in the eyes, too. That was the presentation. Then he said, hey, what did you sound like? I said, I have all kind of audio tapes and all audition tapes, but I'm living out of my frat house at the university, and I haven't even unpacked. But I tell you, can I use your production studio here at the station, WOLF now? And I'm 80 years old, so fuck, I'm gonna tell you these stories like they should be told. Okay,
Thank
George,
you.
radio, you're in Syracuse. So, George, here's what happens, man. I said, can I use your production studio, to cut a tape? Those days was Ampex tape machines and all. And he said, hey, let me get somebody to show you how to work. I said, Mr. Shine, you're hiring me to become a broadcast engineer here. And, your production, just show me the production studio. I said, I'm sure it's basic radio broadcast stuff. And so, I said, no, I never seen it before. Show me the studio. So he showed it to him, and I pointed out, I said, it's your audio boards, that producer Gates board, and those are the big 300 series Ampex, the big 10-inch reels, tape machines in those days.
I have some tapes.
Yeah.
In that box we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
When I had some things.
Yeah. So, George, I go in the production room. Then I go in, I pull, in those days, your news came in by teletype, AP. And it was all, the teletype machine was always in a closet in the radio station running. So I found that, and I pulled off a news summary. And then I said, I need some commercial copy. Rick was on air middays at WOLF when I walked in. And I said, Rick, my name is Rick too, man. I said, look, where y'all's the promotional records and stuff, the record companies would load you up with records. He said, oh yeah, look at that box over there. And WOLF's control room was really colorful, man. They had all these cutouts and all and everything in those days. And of course, George, I went in and got about 12 records, 45s, at that time. And I listened to the radio station. WOLF at that time was the top 40, was using what I call the Drake format, where you do the intro, outros. Personnel is kept a little bit low, you get your news, 2020 news and all. So basically, I got some news, I got some commercial copy. I never forget, Day Brothers. You remember, I don't know if you ever heard of Sibley's Department Store.
Sibley's, look, I'm going to go even further. Wells and Coverly, Addis Company.
Yeah, but these and some of the commercial copy I got. And then, of course, WOLF had a nightclub called The Place, which is out Route 11 and Baru, North Syracuse.
Oh, and North Syracuse. Okay.
Yeah, but I did. I had these commercials, and I did a live read. So I went in the production room and basically did a 20-minute radio show, mimicking their format. WOLF, the Big 15 with Rick Wright in the daylight. This guy played the music. Here's the Beatles and the long and winding road. Played. So anyhow, put the tape together. And then I went back and did the edit, what we call telescoping in radio, where basically you have the intro of the announcer going into the record, hit the post, and then the outro. And then the news, of course, I had it complete. The tape was ran, I think after I edited, George, that 20 minutes, I edited down to about 5 minutes.
Now, you did that all in that one day?
Yeah, I did this about an hour and 15 minutes.
And they let you do it?
Yeah, let me do it. So then after I did the edit on the tape, queued up the tape on the Ampex tape machine, potted it up on the board. All I had to do was hit the play button. So I went back out and I said, Mr. Shine, tape. He said, let me get the program director. The program director of WOLF then was Jim Sims. Jim was the afternoon drive jock, really popular disc jockey here in Syracuse. And he came and he was program director. So I said, come on, listen to the tape. And I said, hey, guys, no, I don't want to bias your thoughts about the tape. Just go in the production room. I'll sit out here in the lobby and wait, whatever you think. And in the meantime, while I was out there, the young ladies who were the secretaries at the radio station, they had a million questions for me, man. Where was I from and everything, how long I've been in radio and everything. So they listened to the tape. They came back out in probably about 8 minutes or so with this real puzzled look on their faces. George, the general manager, the program director of the station, man. And they looked at me and they said, damn, you don't sound black. True story, man. And I said, well, I am an African. Here I am. You're looking at me. So, well, you can put all your notions in that, of course, what we have dealt with, with the stereotyping of our folk, especially in mass communication and media.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm standing there. They were kind of puzzled. So you got the job. But then the chief engineer, I don't know if you remember Vince Mangiamilli.
No.
Vince was the chief engineer of WOLF. Brilliant guy, man. Had long hair, always wore sunglasses all the time. And there was other things going on too with Vince, but he was brilliant. He was walking down the hallway and he saw me. He said, hey, brother, you got a first ticket? I said, yes, I do. And he was a chief engineer. He looked at the general manager and the programmer. He said, hey, man, you better hire this guy, man. This is a guy I need. And so I started working at WOLF radio on the weekends, man.
And the rest, and that's another story. Talking with Dr. Rick Wright here on George Kilpatrick Inspiration for the Nation. We got more stories, including Dr. Rick's work with the athletics department at Syracuse University. All that when Inspiration for the Nation continues right after this. Welcome back, George Kilpatrick, Inspiration for the Nation, celebrating people we feel good about. Our guest in the studio is Dr. Rick Wright, Professor Emeritus at Syracuse University, of course, radio legend, 80 years old on Tuesday, July 24th, and we are just walking through his life. And so I promised before the break that we would talk about your work with athletics, but you've got another story for us at WAER, because you actually were like a mentor to all of us when I was a student at Syracuse. And I wasn't actually in Newhouse like Butch and Kenny and all the rest of those guys. And, we did 360 Ebony Degrees. I did the Minority Report, Third World News, and Heading East. And I did a couple of overnight. See, I did my hands like I was DJ. I did a couple of overnight shifts as a DJ. And my DJ name, I had a DJ name.
Give it to us.
So my DJ name was Sporty G. Sporty
that would work.
G. That was my DJ name on WAR when I did a couple overnights. I didn't have a regular shift. I fill in, but Sporty G. I used to have a little Kango cap. Oh yeah, your boy was rocking back in the day.
You're rocking, weren't you?
But this was part of because WAR during February would have what they call Black Expressions Week. Right.
Oh, yes.
And so they would turn it programming over to, Butch pretty much. But it was also all news week. So in between them doing news in part of the day, the rest, the evening day part was urban radio, 360 Ebony Degrees. And so that's how I actually got into the business with my roommate at the time, Lee Cornelius.
Lee.
Yes, I should say Dr. Llewellyn J. Cornelius. And so Lee Cornelius and Lee was my roommate freshman year, says, hey, you want to go, you interested in radio? And so on, there was like the spring semester, which is 1978, they had some sort of thing. And I went up to Syracuse University, Newhouse School, and that's where I met my friends for life, Kenny Dees, Donovan Welsh, Michael Hilbert, Vicky Mena.
Yes.
I'm going to mess up some names. Cheryl, Monique Fortuné, Vicky, Gwen Sparks, and the Golden Voice, and so many others. GV, the Golden Voice, Mike G, all of this folk that ended up coming through Newhouse, and of course Ben G. Did I not say Ben G with an exclamation point at the end of it? But I wanted you to talk before you get to that story in WAER and before you get to the athletics department. I want you to talk about what all of us, and this may sound self-serving to others, but it's my show, so I can do this. What have we meant? What have we meant? Those of us who believed in university and community and connecting, right? And you through all of the shows that you've done, because Old School Sunday was not only here, you did it on Wolf too, right? Didn't you do it on WOLF as well?
No, not. In fact, I was only over at WOLF.
Wait, but
I
what
got
was
there
this?
at 7.
What did you do with John 1? What was that show, and where did you do it?
Oh, that's when we reinvented WOLF.
Right. So you
OLF,
did. So you were on WLF, because
yes,
that's where
yes.
that before I came to iHeart, we were over there. So what
Yeah,
is
we were doing Saturdays. John Juan and I had a Saturday afternoon show. What had
Right.
happened? Wolf had been off the air at some time, and then we recreated WOLF back on the air.
Right. It was only at night, right? Or was it only in the
Well,
daytime?
eventually we went full time 24/7.
Right, right. But I think
R&B.
yeah. So what
Yes,
is all of this?
WOLF. But
Your
at
legacy,
first, when Wolf went on air, that was nighttime. Yes.
Right.
It was called the Sounds of the City.
Sounds of the
was
City.
the imaging of it.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
what I'm getting at later, all right, Wolf became, and then Butch. Hey, George, you froze. And Butch Charles, Merrill B, came in and said, we're going to turn WOLF into a full-time R&B radio station. And that's when things were really rocking. You were doing news, George, by the way, too.
Right, right. I did news over there,
yes.
And it was a lot. So what is all of our efforts, your efforts, meant to the community and that idea of bridging the gap?
Well, George, I tell you, Mrs. Leola Dyson, I'll go back to Mrs. Dyson, who was my godmother, giant in the Rollins Broadcasting Company. Let me clear my throat here. In radio, Jack Holmes, one of my great mentors, said, Rick, whenever you make a mistake in radio, you'll never make a mistake in radio. If you have to clear your throat or something, you don't hit the cough switch. Clear it and tell the people, I got to clear my throat. And let me get back going.
That's not
Jack
what I
Holmes.
was taught, but go ahead.
No. But these were the announcers.
Did y'all have a cough button back then?
Yeah, but what they said that is what you want to do when you have equipment problems or you might mispronounce some words or whatever. Don't get just integrate that into your show.
Right, and don't apologize.
Don't apologize. Just integrate it into your show.
Yeah, a lot of people.
Project a personality. Then
so what have we meant to the community?
Yeah, but George, let me get back and indicate this though. Having grown up in media, and of course, growing up in a segregated South. I mean, I call it the last of segregation, racism.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up in northeastern North Carolina. Very fortunate, though, as a young African-American kid in a small town of about 1,200. My father, of course, was really my big role model who opened up doors. But really, the kind of experiences that I was getting in my hometown, a little poor African-American kid like me would not get that shot. And I did. And it was pretty much my laboratory. So really, everything I've ever done in life has never been a job. It's a labor of love. My work with the military, professional broadcasting, and also academia. I really love libraries, teaching, and I love people. And I got it all really from Mrs. Leola Dyson, who was really on the radio side. And of course, I had a lot of great teachers. I can name all these great teachers all the way from first grade all the way up through HBCU colleges and all, who were my role models. And then, of course, God's on the throne in this too, George. But the thing that I've enjoyed from Mrs. Dyson was she said radio is probably the most greatest tool, especially an inexpensive but highly efficient tool for reaching people. And she always said, Roosevelt, whenever you do a radio show, I can hear in there, Godson, Roosevelt, really, when you really get serious about radio, you want to do a radio show. You want to make your show so compelling, so exciting, so dynamic, the storytelling aspect aimed at your target audiences, that you want to make your show to become a part of people's families. Really, and they've never met you before, but they turn the radio and this becomes a part of their family. And she said, you have really got things rolling when they will call you before they call the police or somebody when they're in trouble. And that was especially in urban communities too. And radio, of course, was a tribal drum.
So
and of course, radio, and radio's ability to localize with really live, local, exciting announcers, it's still its greatest attribute. And that's part of the thing that's been taken out of radio now.
So what is the impact you think you've had on Syracuse?
I tell you, George, I'm still, I go places now. I go to a Wegmans or a store, man, anywhere in Syracuse, and people I don't even know. I mean, all demographics, man, young, old, all ethnicities. They come up, hey, Dr. Rick, how you doing, man? When you get that show back on the air, man, I miss it. This is what I'm getting. I get this. I got it today. And of course they said, they said, well, really, you talked about the community. We'd love your historical context you would talk about. And you gave, an uplifting to our people, especially the African-American community, which I truly enjoyed. And of course, I never forget our fret brother, the late Dennis Dowdell, who did News Views, Black Perspectives on WSYR TV. And he was saying, hey, platform. And we didn't have all the platforms you got in there, George. Y'all, how many platforms?
Yeah, I was going to say, right? I mean, and in some ways, I feel like, and these are all Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated brothers, I feel as though I'm part of that legacy, right? In some way, shape, form, or fashion. And a guy sent me an article he found in some used bookstore somewhere, and it was an article about me talking about, I'm going to find it here. I was talking about the politics of back in the day, and I was like, who wrote that article? Because it was like, here's the stuff I'm just going to read you a little bit, Doc.
Yes.
I was talking about a new generation of Black politicos. So here's what I said. I don't even know what year this is. If their emergences, this is what the article says, if their emergence has heralded the dawn of a new era in the political arena not too long ago and fueled hopes that a new generation of Black political operatives had surfaced that had the education, the perspective, and even the courage to make an impact, speculation is now rife as to what might have happened over the course of the past few months, particularly, with the past few elections, particularly after the mayoral elections are ready for this year, Doc. 1985. Where is Hiram Sack, the ubiquitous, seemingly indefatigable, where did I get that word from? Young Black Republican who was seen and heard everywhere proclaiming his affinity for the grand old party. Watch this. What about what's Walt Dixie doing these days? And more importantly, what has happened to the organization that he and his colleagues put together that powered its way from the grassroots level to city and county-wide recognition in such a relatively short period of time? No one can say for sure what happened, but if indeed anything has transpired that can be construed constituting a significant change in the political horizons as far as Blacks are concerned, what has been poignantly clear is the absence of any form of concentrated effort on the part of the young politicos to articulate the concerns of the Black community. Dang, George, what you do?
Well, I tell you what, you got a lot of writings. In fact, Gregory Shepard, our big actor, and all, sent me an email a couple of weeks ago, and there was an article that had been done on me that appeared in the Black Voice. The newspaper, the Black Voice?
Yes, from Syracuse University. And I used to work on the Black Voice when I was in school.
Yes, he sent me, and there was this article of when I first came on the Newhouse faculty. Black professor entered the ranks of the Newhouse faculty.
Wow.
And it was all about my background and everything, a nice picture and all. But George, let me go to this real quick, and this is something that people really would love. And like I said, I'm still trying to answer that also. In fact, I'm writing a book right now called I Turn Up the Radio.
Right.
I'm working on right now. In fact, after I get off, I'm going to do some writing tonight, which basically will really lay out a historical timeline with funny bits about my life itself, from especially in the area of radio and my military side and the academic area. And also, I've taught so many students, man, at Syracuse who really hit the big. In fact, today I was talking to Dave Gorab. Dave hands up all the talk programs for Sirius Satellite Radio. Let me clear my throat. And Scotty McFarland. Scotty, we were just on the phone a couple hours ago.
Right.
And Scotty's now the congressional correspondent for CBS Washington, man. And I mean, the list is long.
Look, Aaron Katursky, who's on ABC News.
Aaron is on. In fact, I just saw him on ABC just a few minutes ago, covering the story about the guy who killed all these young ladies out of New York. That story that just broke. But Aaron was an SYR guy. I mean, the list is long. And I tell you what's really exciting that I really enjoy, like especially doing NCAA basketball when all these games are on the air, and even football. And sometimes, George, I've seen when I've got 5 students that I've taught at the Newhouse School on air at the same time, covering different stories. Mike Tirico is covering something over here. Dave Pash is over here. Beth Mowens is over here doing a game. Or Sean McDonough. Oh my God, the list is long. Iron Eagle. These are all people that I taught. But George, let me give you this story, the WAER story. When I first came here on faculty, Dr. Myers said, Roosevelt, you're going to be the faculty manager of WAER Radio. This is 1975. And of course, WAER was completely student run and operated, studios in the Newhouse School up on the 4th floor. And also I taught another course that I taught for like 38 years at Newhouse. It was TRF 545. It was broadcast performance, radio and television announcing. And the class, all those years, every year was packed. And out of that class grew some of the biggest broadcasters on the air right now, as we have this wonderful program, New Inspiration for the Nation, here on Power 620, Syracuse, New York. Well, George, WAER was completely student-run and operated. Really, the station was ahead of its time, and the university
back in the day, before it became professional.
A horrible decision when they basically changed WAER into a public station, because the students were, AER was ahead of its time. One of the shows was 360 Ebony Degrees on air at night. In fact, what was that? You remember I had the show called Evening Report? It was a 1-hour news show where all the students interested in broadcast news, they would have interviewed the city hall, the police chief, anything happening throughout the day. And Evening Report was a 1-hour news magazine show on WAER every night. And Ben Green was a big news guy also in that. And then after that, 360 Ebony Degree, and that was Tony Benier's great drop that we used for years. 360.
Pat Trowers, Desiree Frazier, all these good folks.
So anyhow, here's the story though. My first Christmas here at Syracuse, I think it had to be 1975 or either 1976, getting old now. But I was faculty manager of the station, and the students in those days, there was no computers. You had to be there, in the station to spin the records, handle the mic, and take the meter readings and everything. So at Christmas time, they never shut the station off the air. Some students stayed behind and didn't even go home. They so much loved WAER radio. I'm in my office, so they had put together a skeletal staff that would keep the station going over Christmas. And it was the day before Christmas Eve. I was in my office checking papers. The semester was over, getting the grades and stuff done. And a knock came at the door. And a couple of students who had planned to stay to keep WAER on the air said that their parents had called them, begging them they better come home for Christmas. And so they looked at me and said, Professor, we don't know what to do with the radio station. I said, oh, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it.
I got you.
I got it. And that's like, you're telling me here's a candy store, the professor who teaches radio broadcasting. I was doing research, always doing research on radio broadcast formats. So Craig was in town, and Synod owns the Armstrong Transmitters. That's out in Marcellus, New York. They were around and said, we're going to keep the station going. So anyhow, Christmas Eve, it had to be 1976, George. I went on the air on WAER radio around 3 or 4 in the afternoon on Christmas Eve. And I said, okay, let me just experiment. And WAER's record library, man, it was incredible. They had, you know the big record, our room with all the records and stuff?
Yep, uh-huh.
It was everything. And the R&B stuff hadn't even been played before. So basically what I did was turn WAER into 360 Ebony Degrees.
Love it.
And I went on the air at 3 and right in through Christmas Eve, played, and just all kind of music. And people were calling, the phones were blowing up. People were bringing food by the station. And I never get Larry Martin. Larry Martin. Goodness, came and told me one day, he said, Rick, I was home partying, had a house full of people, man, and I fell asleep with you on the air at like 11 or 12 midnight. And he said, I turned the radio back on, woke up in the morning at 8 o'clock, you were still there.
On the air.
Still on the air. I was having a ball. But
how long did you stay on the air, bro?
14 hours.
Wow.
And then Craig Fox came in, or Synod came in and relieved me, but I was on the air. It was really a Christmas gift to the city of Syracuse. 360 Ebony Degrees with Dr. Rick Wright all through the night.
You've also had a significant work with the athletic department as well.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
I mean, like
Well,
the football team particularly.
Well, here's what happened. When I came back on faculty, Dr. Myers came to me and said, Roosevelt, there's something else, but I got to get you involved with. Thank God we got you on faculty, working with the athletic program. And at the time, Coach Swartzwater had retired. Frank Maloney was head football coach. And Syracuse, when I came here, had just gone to its first Final Four out in San Diego, California. That was when Syracuse beat North Carolina. The Roy Danford, Roy's Runts, they were calling themselves. They were incredible out at Manley Fieldhouse. Well, anyhow, Syracuse had gone to the Final Four, and that really picked the energy up of our visibility and all. So I said, Dr. Myers said, Roosevelt, I'm going to have Coach Danford has got a bunch of basketball players coming in this weekend, and love to have you to come. You just start working to help with recruiting. So I love it. So Coach Danford brought a bunch of players over and showed them around Newhouse, a tour, talked about communications and that side of the academic advising session. That would spend 2 or 3 hours, tour of Newhouse, put them on camera, take them up to WAER-radio. And so after I did that a couple of times, I got a phone call from Coach Frank Maloney, who was a football coach at the time. And Coach Maloney called me and said, hey, Professor Wright, man, I talked to Roy Danford and Lusty AD. They said, man, I think I thought I made a mistake by leaving Michigan to come to Syracuse. Those are the last days of Arch Bowl Stadium and, trying to get things going. He said, man, if I could just put a fence around New York State and get the best New York players here at Syracuse, I think I can get things turned around with our football program. He said, there's a player goes to White Plains High School in White Plains, New York. Man, if I could get a kid like that, I think I could really get things rolling. He said his name is James Arthur Monk. And I said, hold it. You said White Plains High School? The principal is one of my fraternity brothers. I know him.
No, okay.
Jefferson, who was the principal. So I went out to Coach Maloney's office. That was before they got all the complex you got there, to his football office. Went in, George, into this great radio audience. And there was Coach Maloney. I said, Coach, are you trying to art? He said, yeah, man. I just said, hold it one sec. Give me your telephone. So I looked up, got the phone. Said, you have the phone number for the school because y'all trying to, yes. Gave me the phone. Mrs. Ponza was his secretary, athletic secretary, football. Call White Plains High School. They answered the phone. I said, hi, I'm Professor Rick Wright at Syracuse. Mr. Jefferson, tell Jeff his frat brother, Omega brother, Dr. Rick Syracuse on the phone. Within about 2 minutes, Principal Jeff comes on the phone. Man, you at Syracuse. I heard that you at Syracuse. Man, this is great. He said, you guys are trying to recruit one of my best athletes, one of the best we've ever had. And man, now that I know that you're at Syracuse, and I know they've had some problems up there recently. Man, I just feel gratified just to have you there that he can lean on and make sure he'll be okay. So what happened? Official visit. Art Monk came up for an official football visit, and you remember Bill Spencer, George? Coach Bill Spencer, African American coach. He was the wide receiver coach for Syracuse football. And so he brought, and I never forget that morning, it was snowing like everything when I woke up that Saturday morning. And I looked out the window and said, okay, God, got to land this young man. This is really my first real time to really do a recruiting job. So George got over to Newhouse and the students up at WAER, the sports guy, said, guys, we got a high school All-American named Art Monk from White Plains High School. I'll be showing him around the building. He said, can we interview? I said, yes, we'll bring him up to the radio station. And Art was crazy about photography. He wanted photography was his love. So I went over to the photography lab. Newhouse One, those days of chemical,
right?
Digital, incredible stuff you got in there. And told the students that I was bringing a high school All-American. We were trying to recruit for football. And, when I bring him over, y'all let him turn them loose and show them photography. So Coach Spencer, here comes, they pull up to Waverly Street, still snowing outside. Art comes in. Well, he was really quiet, nice guy, tall. Well, he was roughly, 6'4", 200 pounds then, high school. And Art comes in, and I immediately see him and say, Art, welcome to Syracuse, man. A little chilly outside, but you're a New York City guy. So I'm Dr. Rick Wright, the Newhouse School. And he said, yeah, Mr. Jeff said, I said, yeah, we go back a long way. Come on in here, son. Let me show you this Newhouse. Let's talk academics first. And I gave him a tour of the Newhouse. We went around the Newhouse School about 2.5 hours, went down to photographic lab. The students let him print pictures, took him up to WAER radio, the sportscasters of that era, interview him and all. So after the tour of Newhouse, we went back to my office and he asked me this question, George. He said, Professor, can I see the stadium? And I didn't get the relevance of that right then because I'm from, HBCUs and Archbold, even in its old ending days. I thought it was
old stadium, yeah.
Magnificent.
He didn't play in the dome. He never played in the dome.
Yeah, there was nothing. And so what happened, I called over to DPS and Officer Grant.
Oh, Mr. Grant.
Yes, indeed, Officer Grant, because he had dogs. He had the dogs and everything. Got here, and I said, Officer Grant, I'm a professor. I said, yeah, Rick, you're new. I said, we haven't met. Look, can y'all open up one of the gates to Archbold State? I got a high school All-American here who we're trying to recruit for the football team. He said, man, never got a request. I said, yeah. So I had a bunch of coats, a longer coat. I told Art, put this coat on and this scarf. We're gonna take a walk over the campus, over to Archbold Stadium. And this is Saturday. It's roughly about, I think, 2:30, coming up 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon. George, we walked out of Newhouse 2, walking across the plaza, and the sun came out. Campus looked absolutely gorgeous, with fresh snow on the ground. We walked over past your school, the Maxwell School. There was President Lincoln's statue. Eggers Hall hadn't been built yet. And we walked past, where the physics building is now. Steele Hall was up, but there was Archbold Stadium. And there was Officer Grant, man. Love him. And he was there with a big smile on his face, and a couple of other DPS officers, Syracuse's police department, safety department was standing there. So we walked into Archbold Stadium, went up on the north side. They built all these extra bleachers to increase the capacity of Archbold, like 45,000 people. Especially the days of Florida Little and Jim Brown. They were packing them in, man, and Ernie Davis. Went up there on the 50-yard line and looked out at the field. I said, Art, I love athletics, especially college athletics. I said, I finished basically 3 HBCUs, man, and this is Archbold Stadium. This is the second oldest football stadium in the United States of America. The oldest stadium is Harvard College's, Harvard University Stadium. I said, Art, that 100 yards you're looking at, there's some of the greatest football players who ever played the game have played in Archbold Stadium. First name I dropped was Jim Thorpe, Carlisle, who came here and played in Archbold, the early 1900s. Started naming all the guys like Gale Sales that had played here, all the big ones, man. Roger Starback for the Naval Academy, all that list. And then I started going through the list, and then I got into the Syracuse players, Jim Brown, Floyd Little, Bo Nance, Sadat Singh. And I told him the question. I said, well, great brother was here back in the 1930s, man, faced with racism and everything. In fact, he died as a Tuskegee Airman flying an airplane, man, in Lake Huron. And I told him about Sadat Singh, and he was incredible, Art. And I said, Art, but there's one thing about Archbold Stadium that nobody can take this ever from us. I said, the first African-American Heisman Trophy was won right here in this stadium, Ernie Davis. So he was kind of quiet and, he looked, and then we left. And then Officer Grant drove us back over to Newhouse. Right. This story's about the ending. Well, get back to Newhouse. Phone was blowing off the hook. It was Coach Maloney and Coach Spencer. Hey, Professor Wright, how things going at Art? I said, oh, great. We did a big tour of Newhouse, the TV studios, radio studios. Students at AER interviewed him, went down to photo lab, and they showed him how to print pictures. He just great smile on his face. And then we just went over and looked at the stadium. He wanted to see the stadium. There was this silence on the other end of the phone. You did what? You showed him the stadium. And I didn't know at that time, they were so ashamed of Archbold. When the recruits came in, they just drove by and said, there's our stadium. And, but I
So
showed
wait,
them.
so
Yeah,
so
so
is the bottom line is you help get Hall of Fame Washington team Philadelphia Eagle Art Monk
yes,
14 Hall. You were responsible.
yeah. Here's the kick of the story. So they came over and picked up Art at Newhouse, Coach
Right.
Bill Spencer, and it went back out. And of course, that weekend required, probably meals with the team, going out in the city and, the official visit, which is like 3 days or so. So Bill Glavin, the late Bill Glavin, Bill was head of the magazine department at Newhouse. He died a number of years ago. Great guy, incredible, loved him. And he knew that I was working with the athletic department, trying to recruiting players at Syracuse. And he would come in my office on like a Monday or Tuesday after a weekend, and he comes, hey, Rick, man, who did we have? Who came this weekend, man? We need a winner around here, man. And I said, yeah, we had one incredible young man who was a hurdler, wide receiver, running back named Art Monk. And then Bill would ask me, well, tell me how you recruit, man. What's your style? So I told him all that. Then I said, yeah, I took him over and showed him the stadium. Bill Glavin looked at me and said, you did what? You showed him the stadium? I said, yeah. He said, man, the athletic department is so ashamed of the stadium, they would not ever show the stadium to the athletes. And I said, why not? But then, that here I'm second year on faculty at the Newhouse School. I asked to help with recruiting, and I'm going with my style. And then all of a sudden, George, I had that fear, that FOF fear of failure.
Right.
I blown it, man. I said, no, it can't be. So then I just put in the back of my mind, a couple of weeks went by, and I went back to my office at Newhouse. In fact, my office number was 381 in those days. When the secretaries, they got those little pads about, all this number. That was a handwritten sign up on like an 8.5, 11 sheet of paper. Call Professor Wright with an exclamation point. Call Coach Maloney immediately and ask for Mrs. Ponza. So I saw this sign on the door, and the way it was written, man, I looked at it and I said, oh, yeah, here it comes, Rick. Okay. So I picked up the telephone, called out the Manley Fieldhouse. Mrs. Karen Ponza was the secretary. And after I said, Mrs. Ponza, Professor Rick here over at Newhouse, is everything okay? She came back and said, Professor, everything is perfect. I said, perfect. And said, yeah, Coach Maloney wants to talk to you. So Coach Maloney, but he's dead and gone, man, and tried here at Syracuse. He came on the phone and said, hey, Professor Rick, what did you tell Art? And I said, well, first of all, I told him you were a great football coach and we needed him to come to Syracuse. He said he's coming. And it said his mother was adamant about him coming because he was looking at Maryland and some other schools. And that was Art Monk. In fact, George, if you ever go into the YouTube archives, there is a 30-minute documentary we did on the last game played at Archbold Stadium.
Which I was at against Navy.
Yeah, against Navy. And in that, I'm in that production. To the audience that's listening here, radio, and they want to get the real essence of the story. By the way, no disinformation from Dr. Rick. These are true stories.
Wow, that's incredible. Dr. Rick, we're over, but let me ask you lastly.
Yes.
So we talked about WAER. We didn't talk about your old school Sunday a little bit on Power, but I want to know if you could look back over your career in media and radio, if you could pick one, I mean, of course, we just lost Jim Brown a few weeks ago. But if you could pick one or of the most significant broadcast moments you've had on the air that impacted you the most, what would that moment be?
George, Pan Am Flight 103.
Yeah.
It was Christmas time, man. The building was empty. And here's AER again. Building was empty. All the students there were a few students up at the station. And I was in my office checking papers and looking at tapes. Tom Brokaw came. I had a big TV set in that office, which I kept on all the time. Tom Brokaw came on the air and said that a plane had blown up or crashed over Scotland, a Pan Am flight from London, New York City base. And now all the students are gone. It's Christmas time, man. And Dr. Joan Depper, who eventually wrote a book on this, was in her office. And I went on and said, Joan, there's a message of Tom Brokaw came on the air and said a plane, New York bound out of London, had crashed over Scotland.
Flight 103, Pan Am Flight
and
103.
And then the immediate thing, radio. Syracuse had a London semester program in London, radio television program in the international, abroad program at London, where the students would spend one semester at London, visiting the BBC and all the radio and television facilities over in Britain, Great London. And this was that, that fall semester.
Right.
We're ending up at Christmas time. So I'm there, George. And then I said, oh my God, I hope none of our students are on that as a flight, trying to get back from London. And within about 20 minutes, Tom Brokaw comes back on in. Tom, I knew well because I worked with him when I was a local sales manager for NBC Radio in Washington, D.C., while I was at Howard. And Tom said, Pan Am Flight 103 had crashed or whatever over Scotland. And on the plane were students from Syracuse University trying to get back home. I said, oh my God. And Rusty the Bailiff Burrell, who was a great disc jockey at WJPZ Z89, which is another story of getting that station started. His brother, Stephen Burrell, got killed on that fateful flight. And then I got up and went upstairs to WAER radio and really having to write a story real quick for the students who were on doing news that that flight had blown up or crashed over Scotland, and we lost 36 people, and the wall of memory is right there in front, right at the top of University Avenue to this day. That was a moment, George. And it was right at Christmas time too, man.
Amen. Well, I tell you what.
Yeah, Christmas.
You have 1,000,001 more stories, and we don't have enough time to get them
all
in.
George,
So this is part one.
Yes.
Part one. But one thing we want to do is say happy birthday to
Thank
you,
George.
Dr. Roosevelt, Rick Wright, Dr. Rick, radio legend here in Syracuse, and what you have meant to so many of us who have come through Syracuse University, what you have meant to this community, where you have over the years have endeavored to use the power of your voice to, like, you want the people to know, you want the people to be informed, and you are one of the best at it. Legend and bringing our community together. You know everybody, you've been everywhere, but more importantly, you belong to us here at Syracuse and Syracuse University. So I want to salute you, congratulate you, give you your flowers, because you, brother, have made an impact. And your 80th birthday, when you sit down and reflect and have your piece of cake and ice cream, know that you have impacted the lives of this community for generations, right? You have impacted the lives of people in this community for generations. And for Butch and Kenny and all of us, Donovan and all the rest of the crew, we love you, we appreciate you, and we wish you many, many more years.
Well, George, thank God. I'm with God's blessings. Hope he can keep me around. I got a beautiful son, Roosevelt Reuben Wright III, who's following in my footsteps, looks like, and the tears of my eyes are flowing. I want the people to know right now that I really tried to be the best I could here in Syracuse, and especially the urban radio, because we had nothing here when I came, and to train a lot of students, and we're still struggling, still even to this day. But I just want everybody to know that Dr. Rick came to Syracuse, and I gave it what I could give. And I loved it. It's been a wonderful, incredible trip. And to all my folk out there, my Syracuse family, George, especially you, man. I mean, we're together here, and this is the year 2023, and I'm 80 years old, man. but I'm in good shape. I'm in good health. And you just had a big operation, you were telling me, man. And I got a little arthritis in my left leg and around the knee too. So, but I got some stuff from the VA to keep me going, man. So thank you, George. Let me be on your radio show, man. But I ain't done yet. Okay, let me leave it at
And
that.
you know what?
All
But
through
that's another story.
Oh, God, yeah. And I must say, as I close out on your radio show, but that's another story.
Inspiration for the nation. Dr. Rick Wright.